In this episode, we're setting our turntables to 1966 to explore an album that didn't just change the Beatles, it changed music forever. How did the Beatles transition from their mop-top image to full-fledged sonic innovators? Stay tuned for Revolver and a special Beatles edition of Three Truths and a Lie. Stay with us.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff. And Eric, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast, home to the mealy, marbly mouth host, who, if I did this right, you did not hear the 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 tries before to get the opening correct. That's
gotta keep it simple, man. You see, you put yourself in that spot.
You're right.
All this clever, stuff. So hey,
I'm in the empty room. I have the paint can, and I put myself in the corner. There's no. I can't blame our guest, and I can't blame you, Eric. You're right. No. Eric puts me straight. He's a straight talker.
Yeah.
He's like, this was a trap of your own devising. So, but we
it's not that we don't appreciate the effort. So,
Thank you.
But
But when you're sitting there for 5 minutes while trying to get it right, it does get a little long in the tooth. But anyway, we did our jobs right. You didn't hear any of that. You're just hearing the fresh intro. So thanks. If you're new here, oh God, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. If you want to help support independent content creators like us, you could be one of our Green Room supporters. Go to buymeacoffee.com/3324. That's buymeacoffee.com/3324. Otherwise, either way, episodes are always free, so you could just get those every Thursday. Just follow us on your favorite podcast provider, and technology will do the rest for you. It'll just give you a little gentle nudge when a new episode is available. Right, Eric?
That's right. That is
gentle nudge. We're not going to push. We want your app to gently nudge you.
See, you did fine there. You did just fine with that, with all that. So I don't know.
I think I'm better off the cuff than I am with prepared text. That doesn't seem to work for me. No Shakespeare in this future. Anyway. Anywho, we've got a returning guest.
Mm-hmm.
Eric, I think what I've noticed, or I think when we have guests on for the first time, we usually have them do a top 5. Because it's easy for them to kind of bring material that they know and they like.
Yeah.
And then
you put them
on
to
the
work.
Return trip.
Yeah.
We put them up against the wall and say, all right,
that's a great way to initiate somebody, go ahead.
That's right.
Go do some homework and come back with what you got. So
come back and
it's always fun.
And then we come back. So we are pleased to bring back Mike Stefano.
Mm-hmm.
He is the host creator of the Obstacle Running Adventures podcast. So if you're into physical fitness, even if you're not into obstacle running, it's a great podcast anyway, because he's just so in depth. He's so passionate about the sport. You can't help but get his infectious nature kind of, and he does interviews, he does deep dive. I mean, it's really a well done podcast, and he's on the OCR report on Instagram. So we're going to put links in the show notes for both of those. So you can visit him on Instagram, see what's going on. And then you can check out his podcast, and he's everywhere. He goes where, like, he doesn't, like Eric and I, we sit in the chair and let the music come to us. We sit in front of it. Mike goes to where these events are. He's out there. I know personally because he stuck a mic in front of my face when I first met him, and and that's actually how we met. So Mike, welcome aboard.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me back. It's now I know where to go when I need my ego inflated a little bit. So I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I appreciate
the check cleared, so the ego gets inflated. It's just how,
I appreciate you guys having me back, and more importantly, having me back on a Beatles album, which is a very big deal, I think. So I appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's the Beatles are, we've said it in the past, rock and roll 101 for most people. Most people, Eric, right? We've said also have a Beatles period. If you're really into music, eventually it's at different places for everybody. But everybody, I think, comes to like a Beatles period, and then they kind of go through it, you know.
Absolutely.
And I remember,
Yep.
I remember when I went through my Beatles period, it was very much a dilemma. I was like, okay, what else can I possibly listen to after this? Like, what did you feel that way, Mike? Like,
So
were you that deep down the hole?
So I grew up listening to the Beatles. I was fortunate to have music coming from me from every member of the family. And I think my grandfather was the one that pushed didn't push the Beatles and classical music. I'm talking like Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, Pachelbel.
Wow.
And I've always really respected older music. And this period of time, I think is extra interesting just because of almost like the science that had to go behind the music. A lot of things that people take for granted now. There's a lot of memes and people making fun of how you can't listen to older Beatles albums with a headset because, you have half on one ear, half of the other. But like, that's just where things were. And they would play around with things. And it's fascinating. I don't know if it's ever left. I've always been fascinated with the Beatles. And my wife was fortunate. She surprised me with a Beatles like museum trip, which was really, really fascinating to see how they how tape was actually put together, how they stitched in sound samples. And it's just amazing how they were able to figure that out. And I'm just a massive fan of the Beatles. My wife and my wife's dad disagree with me. They think the Beatles are overrated, which is someone, I guess, that 1% has to exist somewhere of that. But
I'm glad you said it was 1%.
Yes, but I'm a huge fan of the Beatles. Yeah.
Yeah, that you covered a whole lot in there. I mean, yeah, when you think about how music is made today, it's very kind of hit a button and go. But back in the 60s and 70s, there was some craft involved, especially if you were someone who wanted to be a producer or a self-producer, get into that aspect of it. Yeah, you had to know, fooling around with tape loops and that's why Revolver is so important, which we'll get to. Eric, why is this one the one for you? Because there's 13, 12, 11 Beatles albums, and each one is different in its own right. I mean, each one occupies a certain space, but for you, this one is always the one that kind of comes up.
Well, first of all, it came to me, this is the album that defined or put the Beatles in that place where, they were right up against people like Zeppelin and Pink Floyd. And we used to go to this joint in White Plains, which was it was one of those like early sort of places that sold a lot of like marijuana paraphernalia. You bought your bongs there, you bought your, you bought your pins, you bought your t-shirts there, your rock stuff, your posters and that kind of thing, incense, that kind of vibe. And I always wondered why people were always, talking about, this is when we didn't know shit about music, for the most part. Why the Beatles was always in the equation. Why are they so instrumental in music in general? And it's just like, and all I ever knew of the Beatles was the yeah stuff, which was, I'm like, this is it. This is, it's good stuff. It's catchy, but and then I heard Tomorrow Never Knows. So that did it for me. That was the, and so then I understood. I was like, okay, now I get it. Now I understand where, the transition, and of course there's a lot more history to it, but so that became the an interesting point. But I just think this album is just a great sounding record, just in general, just because it's stark. It's very different from the complete pop sound of Rubber Soul, which was, all full on recording. And then right after this was Sgt. Pepper. And then you had, it was bigger and more expansive. Here, there's something about the starkness of this record. It's the songs are decidedly a little bit darker in tone. It's just they were looking to experiment, a lot more, further than what they did on Rubber Soul. Rubber Soul was a great album, but for this one, they decided, hey, we're gonna mess around, Stu. We're really gonna go there. We don't just want to lay down a good sounding, just a good another pop song. We want to experiment with sound. and that appealed to me, of course. In the 80s, that's what I did. I went to school for that, and I became really enamored with sound recording and the way things were made. So, and this album was very, very, it's one of the the absolute pioneers of that. So
yeah. And there's, we're going to do the stats, but there's a lot there. I mean, in some circles, this has eclipsed, in retrospect, it has eclipsed Sgt. Pepper in its innovation. A lot of people now point to this album as kind of something that was more important or more of a watershed moment, which we're going to get to, but we're going to do the stats first. Don't think I forgot. Just because we're 10 minutes in, I didn't forget about the stats. It's still happening. Stats are happening every episode. So here we go. This album was released in August of 1966, 1 month before I was born. Do the math. Produced by George Martin. It was one single released from the album. It was a double A-side, which was Eleanor Rigby and Yellow Submarine. It hit number 1. This was in a time when the Beatles didn't release album tracks were album tracks and singles were singles. So as an adjunct, Paperback Writer, backed with Rain, was actually the single that was released around this time from these sessions. That does not appear on this album, but Paperback Writer and Rain was the emblematic single that they released from this time. It hit number 1 on Billboard. Of course it did. And it was 5 times platinum. So in excess of 5 million copies. 1987 would see stateside the official, when the Beatles CDs started coming out, it would see the actual restored full version, because in America, the American version of Revolver had 3 songs removed from it. And oddly enough, they were all John Lennon songs, which made the album seem very stark in comparison, that the only 2 John Lennon songs are really trippy songs, and that's the only time you hear from him. And then McCartney had like 6 songs, and George Harrison's were all there. So it's really weird. But in 1987 is when America really heard what Revolver was supposed to be. And that's really when I heard it too. And upon listening to this album, I'm going to put it out there. After listening to this album, I think for me, it's probably my favorite total collection of songs from each one of the principal songwriters. I'm not saying it's, Rubber Soul is probably still my favorite album, but when I was listening to this album, like the McCartney songs are like, at his pinnacle. The Lennon stuff is right on the cusp of, like Eric said, like tilting over into Lucy in the Sky and really going there. And George Harrison really came into his own. Like he was no longer the silent Beatle. I got shit to say, and yeah. And especially with Taxman, right? That would really be the first song from the Beatles that was actually about something. So like socially, it was literally about, we pay too many taxes, and he named people in it. Yeah. Where the Beatles hadn't done that before. It was always kind of, hold my hand, love, that kind of stuff. But so this album.
And it opens the album, which is, for the first time, Harrison has the first song. So that's,
So besides the experimentation that it's known for and the innovation, because the Beatles were leveling up, right, Mike? I mean, they were that's the beauty of this group. That's the amazing thing, is you could, their first album was it was only 4 years before this, and they had come so far, so were you, do you track their growth that way as well? Do you listen through and be like, wow,
So listening to the Beatles, it had always been, I would listen to just a whole bunch of random songs. I never took the time to go through album by album until I was in grad school, and I needed to listen to something different and keep myself sane. So what I did is I listened to all the Beatles albums, complete discography, and like ranked each song, because I wanted to figure out like what is the best album. And so that's how I was really introduced to like, oh, all of this set was during this period, all this set was in this period. And what blew my mind the most, I think, is how they weren't around for very long in the grand scheme of things. Yeah. And that's what's most amazing to me, because they've always been my like desert island music of like, if you're angry, like Helter Skelter, if you're like heartbroken, like if there's an emotion, there's a song for it. And the Beatles has such a variety there. So, yeah,
it's absolutely amazing. In the Beatles' lifetime around this point, this would be the final album that they released before they retired from touring. So they were already, and Eric and I have talked about this when we talk about Pet Sounds, and Pet Sounds going to come up again later, where Brian, Brian Wilson is the kind of, that was the rivalry. It was the Beach Boys and the Beatles. And Brian Wilson had already made that decision beforehand. He I can't tour and do what I want to do in the studio because that's more important to me. That's really where the magic is.
Yeah.
And the Beatles were kind of getting towards that. They were kind of tiring of it. And so, Revolver would come out. They would be on tour. And then after that, they said, same thing. Like the stuff we're doing, we want to spend time in the studio. Just as a comparison, Rubber Soul, Eric, took 80 hours to record.
Mm-hmm.
Revolver took 220 hours to record.
Yep.
That's how much more time they were spending, right? The studio has become a member of the band at this point, really, and that's what happened. And again, Eric and I, we've talked about that with other groups, right? Where those tools start to inform what the music is doing, right, Eric? I mean, it's just...
Well, that guy in the background there, I think he cites Revolver as one of his... I mean, that right there. I mean, people say, like he said it was Sgt. Pepper, it was, or I Am the Walrus. But for me, I would argue that this album really must have had a tremendous influence just on the songs. They're short, they're to the point, but yet so masterful in their technique and their what they're doing on each track. It's just so meticulously done, and it's God. I mean, I could totally see Jeff Lynne, coming into this and saying, this is what I want to do right here. Like by listening to this record, and of course a lot of other people too. So I mean, it's just man. Yeah, I mean,
it just opened up a whole new era of creativity. It allowed, and George Martin, we always said, is that conduit. He was the guy. He became less of a producer and more of a facilitator of how are we going to get these sounds. Not this is how it should sound, but I want to sound. John Lennon says I want to sound like God on a Tibetan mountain. How are we going to get that done for Tomorrow Never Knows? And so it's like how can we do that? And they run his vocals through a Leslie speaker and they loop it back, So this was like that time where music started to become art.
Yeah.
Right. Music, everything before this was okay. If they wrote a review, it's like, oh, this is a cheery song. But now music became something that needed, I don't want to say critics, meaning music critics, but something to be analyzed, Mike. Right.
Like meaningful.
Yeah. Like what's going on here? What are they trying to do with these songs? And that's where Revolver, I think, kind of drew that line in the sand and said, nothing, we're doing something different. And this stuff can't really be replicated on tour.
And I think it's really interesting too, like the amount of trust that they must have had with like George Martin too, as a producer, but the influence that he had on that band and vice versa, just, I don't think could be, given enough credit.
And it wasn't, it wasn't like they took him for granted. It was, right. It wasn't like over reliant on George Martin and the engine and, Jeff Emmerich and the Beatles themselves, or at least Lennon and McCartney, I dare say were totally into it. They were totally doing, coming up with the concepts and ideas and really getting involved in the process and just sort of, each member just wanting to do their part and do it right and just play, and they all had that, that mindset, at least at this time. It was it seems like it was a really good time for them to really kind of, to get this kind of stuff done. You could see like the photo sessions of the period, and they're all like, just being wacky but smiling, but yet they're enjoying what they're doing. And God knows how much, of course, what was being taken in.
Well, that's a part of it. Yeah.
Right. I mean, that became instrumental too, of course.
Yeah. The reality of this was that LSD was introduced at this time.
Yeah.
John Lennon took it. George Harrison took it. Ringo took it once because he was pressured into doing it. But Paul McCartney did not take LSD. He would not take LSD. And I think let's let that be the jumping off point. I think this conversation will be easiest if we talk about each one of the songwriters' group of songs. I think that's probably going to be the easiest way to tackle this. So let's go with George Harrison first, because he's got 3 songs. He's got Taxman. He's got Love You Too, and he's got I Want to Tell You. And yeah, I dare say those are probably 3 of, again, on any album, those are probably 3 of his strongest songs, because like we said, there's a change. Even George Harrison came into his own, like on this, following his muse, getting into Eastern philosophy and religion, right? And starting to bring those instruments in. You know, we had heard it on Norwegian Wood a little bit, but now he's fully embracing, this is who I am. These are my beliefs. This is what I'm influenced by, right? So now he's, Eric, right? He's carving out a distinct personality besides being, like we said in Cloud 9 episode, George the Quiet Beatle.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just the idea of bringing in sort of like Indian, those sounds and those, you know, the tablas and the sitar and just, you know, like it's unlike anything anybody ever heard before in a pop group. I mean, it was just, you know, what is this? I mean, I can only imagine what people must have thought listening to this album and hearing that song for the first time, Love You Too, which was just like, whoa, you know. Even like I Want to Tell You is very odd. The chord changes in that song, they're just very aggressive. Very sort of like I don't know. Like he sounds like he's pissed off in the song. He's like like you said before, Dean. Like it's like he's got something to say here. It's not just a simple love song, or you know, it's like it has those aggressive drums and like that key, the heavy piano and. It's just, again,
urgency.
Again, a song I've never heard the like before.
Yeah,
you know, just so different and so fresh. Yeah,
Mike, did you ever see the concert for George?
No, I have not. No.
Okay, you should absolutely check it out, because I think, and it's not because of why Eric thinks it's going to be, but I think the concert for George rendition of I Want to Tell You. I think it really, like Eric, you agree or disagree, but hearing it with a full like 12-piece band, hearing that song performed, there's just something. I think it brought it to another level. Like it really, for me, brought out like the nuance of that song, just of having this full, you know, the full band play that song.
It was tailor made for a lot of voices, a lot of vocals, a lot of that sort of chorus type of thing happening. I think he was already might have been maybe tapping into the whole like wall of sound thing already with that. Sure. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it translates very well into like, you got a whole stage full of like how many, God, I mean,
it was everybody
50 musicians, you know, like just playing this thing. And yeah, you're right. It took it to a whole new level.
Yeah.
But the song was written for that. I think for that purpose, you know, for somebody to kind of come along, and it almost feels like part of a show. Like it's written for like a musical or a play or something to that effect. You know what I mean? Like it's not your typical, like just everyday pop song, you know? So
yeah, it's got an interesting groove to it. It's got an interesting guitar. And then of course you've got McCartney just soaring on top.
Yeah.
Which I think we find a lot in this album. I've made a couple of notes, but in this album, we find McCartney soaring on the top of a lot of these songs. Which is very interesting, which again gives it that extra, like little extra flavor to it. Mike, out of Taxman, Love You Too, and I Want to Tell You, which one resonates with you? Which of the George, are you a George fan? First of all, some people, you know.
Yeah, so I took one of those you know, stupid quizzes like what Beatles are you? and it kept coming up with him, and he was honestly the Beatle that I knew the least about. I feel like most people's answer would be they know the least about Ringo, but I did like a book report very long time ago on Ringo, and he was more interesting than I thought. But yeah, George was just very strange. I really enjoyed the, as you said, like the Indian influences, because no one was really doing that. And even when he continued to be solo, like he was still doing a lot of that weird stuff. And it's like, he was almost like, when he died, it was almost like the death of like that weird genre. But I Want to Tell You was definitely up there. But Taxman was also really interesting, as you said too. Like he had stuff to say. It makes me think of another one of my favorite songs on Abbey Road, like "You Never Give Me Your Money." Like it just it has that feel to it of like they're kind of lashing out, like they have things to say and they're quippy and but it's weird because Taxman doesn't really have the typical Georgeness to it, I would think, but I really enjoy. I think both of those is the top two from him.
Yeah, very, very biting. Very, Taxman is very much an attack song.
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
kind of going in like, 1 for you, 19 for me, because I'm the Taxman. So really kind of laying it out there that, everything isn't always happy in Beatleland. Like they've got some things they got to get off their chest. And I think really, I mean, after John, I think George probably was the next one. John was always putting stuff out there, Norwegian Wood, that he had affairs, and just kind of, his stuff always had a darker slant to it, that kind of undercurrent of like, he could kick the shit out of you if he got angry enough. And now George is kind of like, I got some gripes too, and I'm just going to put it out there, Fun fact, Paul McCartney played the guitar solo in that. That wasn't George. That was Paul McCartney. That.
Oh, wow.
That's him. He played that. So let's move on to John Lennon, because he might be the most, for me, like I said, this is my favorite collection of John Lennon songs. Like bar none, like when I first was getting into the Beatles, I'm Only Sleeping, and She Said, She Said, and Your Bird Can Sing. Oh my God. That's one of my favorite John Lennon songs of all time. Dr. Robert. And then Tomorrow Never Knows. Up till Tomorrow Never Knows, he's playing in the catchy music realm, but still fooling around with stuff, still putting things in, with backward guitar solos and that kind of stuff. And then Eric, of course, Tomorrow Never Knows is just like, Mad Scientist Laboratory.
It's killer. I could spend a whole hour talking about this song, man. I mean, so many people have done deep dives. I've heard other podcasts. I've heard, but man, what a genius piece of music right here. I mean, you're talking about sounds how many sounds that they fit on 4 tracks is astounding to me. It's just, it's a marvel of, and again, I mean, it stands up high above in that, as that type of, monument of recording. I think everybody could kind of look up to this, track alone. And, I think it was Ray Charles who was already like doing like 8-track at this point, but that to me is like, okay, cool. You could do 8-track, but for them to do what they did on this is to me more innovative, to keep it, so lean, but yet so complex at the same time. And man, if you just isolated every single sound, you'd have a cacophony of like, what is this? Why do you have these? Doesn't matter. It's just when it all comes together, man,
it works.
Yeah. There's a sound in there. It sounds like a seagull. That's actually Paul McCartney laughing.
Yeah.
And they manipulate it, and they put it backwards and did all kinds of crazy stuff. And they told each one,
and they speed things up, and they do. Yeah, it's just
variable tape speeds, looping. I think they told each one of the Beatles, like, go home and just record some stuff, like record whatever you want. And then they brought those tapes in and it just incorporated that kind of stuff. So, literally the pinnacle of like, you put it best, Eric. I think like, it's not like the 4-track wasn't a limitation. It was the only limit was their imagination. Right. Yeah. It wasn't about, we only have 4 tracks. It's like, well, we've got 4 tracks, but what can we do with them, and how much can we do?
Right.
And how can we push it? Because outside of that, 8-track was new or barely existed as a thought. Right. 24-track was way far away. Like no one even envisioned that.
Mm-hmm.
So like this is like that. I think that's what makes this album and the Beatles so special, is that they weren't deterred.
No,
by the technology, right? They didn't say, "Oh, well, we can't do that." I really want to do this, but I don't know how. They're like, "I really want to do this. Let's fuck around and figure out how we can." Right, Mike. I think that's one of the things that makes the album special, right? Is that sense of like kind of, we're not just going to make core, love songs. We're going to kind of do things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, the song that sticks out the most is "I'm Only Sleeping." Just such a chill song. Makes me think of one of my favorite songs of all time, "Peace of Mind" by Boston. Just like relax, like don't take life too seriously. Like I'm only sleeping. Like it's fine.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just that the magic that they worked back then. I can only just imagine like the other bands, like what the hell are the Beatles going to do next?
And the people were always rushing to keep up with them. And with "I'm Only Sleeping," that's got the backwards guitar solo. And George Harrison actually knew that they were going to do this. And he said, I wrote the guitar solo keeping in mind that it was going to be played backwards. So I wrote it to make sure it would sound okay when we played it back, that it would sound like a solo. So that's it. So it's not even just, oh, here's a solo, let's run it backwards. That sounds cool. It's like, we're going to do it. We're going to run this backwards. And then the thought is, well, let me come up with something that's going to sound interesting backwards and not just make a solo. And it's like, rip, 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 rip. It's like,
let's not forget two of the best some of the killer drum sound on both these songs.
Yeah.
I don't know. And why doesn't Ringo always sound like this? Like if it's ever, but going forward, like his drums would not sound like this sound, that's tremendous sound that they got, that killer crack. It's just, oh my God, that really drives.
Even he said this was his favorite this is his favorite drum sounding album. I mean,
right.
Again, you're just, and they, Eric, I'm going to guess that they probably just moved off of it, right? To move on to the next type of experimentation, right? Because they never stayed in one. So it's not like, oh, we're going to keep these sounds, right? It's like, we're moving off of that already. Because
if you think about it, no two albums really sounded alike. I mean, especially after Rubber Soul. I mean, just every album had its own distinct just vibe to it. Tone, vibe, sound, studio, whatever it was. I mean, each, and it would just get more and more sort of into the stereo realm, but man, you cannot deny the power of this, this stuff. And it just, and the bass, let's talk about McCartney's bass. I mean, come on. I mean, the bottom end on this record is tremendous. And I love the way it's isolated like that. It's just very, like I said, very sparse. You get to hear every instrument, in its own space. And that's what I love about it. And the harmonies are phenomenal.
She said has got some really nice bass work on it.
I'm only sleeping. I mean, let's get back to Lennon. I mean, just him and McCartney, like you say, like rising above with that vocal, like, by your window, just like,
and your bird can sing. He does it too. Like, tell me everything,
right.
Like it's that extra, it makes and you said it before, none of these songs, I think there's one song that's over 3 minutes and two or three of them are 3 minutes and everything is less.
Yeah.
So the fact that there's all this, patchwork or tapestry of sounds, they're all getting in, which is what I love about pop music. They're getting in the idea and then they're getting out and they say, we're moving on to the next thing. Mm-hmm. But it all makes sense. And by and by putting McCartney in there, at the end, like for second verses or second choruses and having him be above, it just adds that variety to the song. It gives it something different because he's so good at that. He's so good at layering on top of John or George. He just, it's just like, it's like that chef's kiss, and and I think it helps also kind of make Lennon stuff a little bit more user friendly. I'm not saying that there's anything unlistenable on here, but like I said, it's my favorite. Like, and your bird can sing. I can listen to that song like, every day because of that. It's just got that riff and it moves and it just sounds so great. There's just so like each one. In some of the research I was doing, like someone said, this is all four Beatles like at the peak of their powers, all at the same time. They're all like leveling up and hitting at the same time. Except, Ringo sings Yellow Submarine, but as far as his drumming goes, I mean,
we'll get to that.
They're not. Well, let's get to it. That we'll do Yellow Submarine, then we'll get to McCartney because that's. I mean, it's written by McCartney, but it's certainly. When I was listening to it, I think it's a song that everybody takes for granted because it's so kitschy. And then when I was listening to the album again, Eric, I'm like, this is really a novelty. So, like in the context of everything that's going on here,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's supposed to be a palate cleanser for She Said, where it's like, I know what it's like to be dead. Like a real, like the material, like the song content gets heavy right after this.
It's very sort of childlike. You think of it as sort of, I mean, I don't know if this is true, but is it a response? Do you think it's a response to Sloop John B? Because that was the standout track on Pet Sounds.
No, because that hadn't come out yet.
So this was before
the following month. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Which actually, well, actually, since you went there, we'll get to that.
I thought it was in between Rubber Soul and Revolver. I thought Revolver was the direct.
They were recording. No, that's
response to Pet Sounds. Like,
oh God, you're teeing up what I have here perfectly. We don't share notes.
I can see why you're co-host now. Yeah.
One critic or writer called Revolver the letter that went unanswered. You know what that means, Eric? Meaning that the Beach Boys' response to Rubber Soul was Pet Sounds. The Beatles' response to Pet Sounds was Sgt. Pepper.
Okay.
Right? So the Beach Boys were recording their response to Rubber Soul right around now, and Pet Sounds was getting ready to come out. So Revolver comes out, and Pet Sounds was the response to the album before, and Revolver had no response to it. That was the letter that went unanswered.
Okay. Yeah.
And this was between the rivalry. This album came out, but Pet Sounds was already finishing up and getting ready to release, or it came out the month before, whatever it was. So this was not something that was in the equation, because then the Beatles heard Pet Sounds like, oh, Sgt. Pepper.
Well, Good Vibrations, right?
That would be after that, though.
Would it? Okay.
Yeah, that was after Pet Sounds.
But after Revolver came out.
And after Revolver.
Yeah, so that could that be the response? Because that came out before. I mean, they were working on Smile, but that was released as a single, no?
Could be.
Well, that was like sort of like the grand opus of just one song, kind of,
Yeah.
So,
it was supposed to be in Smile, which was the response to Sgt. Pepper.
Yeah.
But the thing is that whole rivalry thing, right? That was going on. I mean, Mike, if you really want to do a deep dive between the Beach Boys and the Beatles at this point, it's the same thing. We're not going to go too far into it, but they're more than Surfin' USA and Surfer Girl.
Yeah.
The Beach Boys were progressing, and each band was watching what the other was doing and responding. But Brian Wilson was doing it as one person, and the Beatles were doing it as four. So yeah, there's that whole connection of these two bands kind of working off of each other. Dr. Robert, another about a real person, right? A lot of celebrities or rock stars would go to see Dr. Robert. He would give them a shot of vitamin B12, but it would have a little extra kick in it. If you needed anything a little extra, you go see Dr. Robert. And again, I love you've got McCartney in there again, like up top.
Mm-hmm.
Just he's up in the attic, just right above him, and I think it just adds that little extra oomph to the Lennon songs. Mike, you have anything about that?
I'm still thinking about Yellow Submarine and how that's typically the song that, like, when I encounter a Beatles hater, that's something that gets brought up, of how goofy it is.
Oh, of course.
And I do think
hanging fruit.
It really is, and I try to have I try to defend it, and then people bring up like the show and then the movie and everything too, and that's something where I'm like, it's kind of hard to defend that as much. But Dr. Rob,
I think the movie redeems the song actually a little bit. I think the movie kind of helps it. The song on its own, yeah, you could be like, oh, they're just being goofs, but they were like that anyway. But
yeah.
And then Dr. Robert was one that I didn't like I didn't like it as much the first time I listened to it, and then when I listened to it again and really understood a little bit more of the meaning of it, I definitely got more of a kick of it. And that's a pretty enjoyable track as well.
Yeah, literally connecting the real things in their life to it, which I really dig. All right, let's get into McCartney, because I think if there's an outlier on this album, it's McCartney.
He owns this record, I feel.
That's why he's an outlier. Go ahead.
And only because of how eclectic every song is. There's classical. There is, it's R&B. Like, this is where did this come from? Right? This is a soul group. Like, this was stuff that before the 70s, like, all of these bands with these horn sections and this kind of, where did that come from? Like, I mean, McCartney was already on the cusp of like writing songs like that. I mean, that just came out of left field.
Yeah.
And, you got something like Good Morning, which not Good Morning, I'm sorry, but Good Day Sunshine.
Good Day Sunshine.
With that rolling bass and that, I just feel like every song is like a breath of fresh air. And, and then you got the downbeat stuff like Eleanor Rigby, but it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautifully told, beautifully sung. No other instruments but classical instruments in the song. And it's just, it just works. Such a sparse, very, very cold track, but it's gorgeous,
Well, a couple of his songs are sparse. For No One is very sparse, and so is Here, There, and Everywhere, very sparse. Now, here's when I was listening to this album again, that's why I love doing these episodes, is because I get new stuff out of it. I get new revelations, and the revelation I took from this with McCartney, this is what I wrote down. McCartney understood his mission, meaning that he never went for the totally experimental shift that Lennon and Harrison embraced. Like, those two really did things that were vastly different. McCartney is on a different track. Like Eric said, he's on a different level. He's becoming a songwriter and an arranger. And he didn't veer off into, none of his songs are experimental in the way that the other two songwriters are. His are straightforward, they're embracing, arrangements and strings and different types of genres of music, but they're not wild swings. They kind of ground the album in. Yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just about to say, like, he stayed more grounded, I guess, compared to the other two that were kind of like almost like balloons lifting off a little bit. And he's like, all right, but I'm going to keep you guys together here. And absolutely. Definitely grounds it. And Got to Get You Into My Life was what I played for my at my wedding, like the wedding cake song. And I could be wrong here, but do you know what that song is actually about?
We'll see. Let's leave it for now.
Okay, sorry.
We'll circle back. No, that's okay. That's okay. But I have something to say about Got to Get You Into My Life. I remember hearing this when I was young, probably in the 70s. And I always thought Got to Get You Into My Life is like a time machine. It does not sound like it's from 1966. It sounds like McCartney and Wings in like 76, Eric, right? I mean,
absolutely. That's what I was saying.
It is so far ahead of its time that when I was young, then I got into the Beatles, I'm like, oh my God, this was not Paul McCartney's solo, and this was in 66, because it does not sound like anything.
Right.
As the Beatles and music was creeping towards psychedelia, right?
Yeah.
You put out something that was so forward facing, but no one was, I don't think, was ready for it yet. Like it does not sound. It sounds so far ahead of its time. It blew my mind.
Yeah, it's like it's funky. It's no wonder that Earth, Wind and Fire covered it. you know, I mean, very easy transition there. But again, it definitely sounds like a Wings track, no doubt.
Yeah,
and I guess
it blew me away. I was like, this song is like a time machine, because I don't know how it's deposited in 66.
It's so vibrant, so loud. Yeah. It's just so and his voice, this would be one of the first times he's really kind of screaming, like how he screams like in that high pitched. You've never really heard him do this before.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah, and
he lets it loose on the vocals a little bit.
Right. Yeah, and it's almost like who was doing this at the time? Even in American black music at this time, who was really doing this sound? It'd be interesting to kind of, figure that out. Like that year, like if anybody else was kind of trying to, who was he inspired by to write this song? Did it come to him just naturally, or did he? You know what I mean? Like that's McCartney, though. I mean,
as we've watched the Get Back documentary, we know that the music just comes out of him, and that's what's amazing about McCartney on this album is he was not distracted by the stuff that was going on. Like none of his stuff. If you go to Sgt. Pepper, it's the same thing. He's making pop songs, and John Lennon is doing "Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite," and George is doing "Within You, Without You," and then we get to "Hello, Goodbye" on Magic. It's not until the White Album where things start to kind of diverge a little bit, but this guy really understood that he was on a mission to become an expert songwriter and arranger. Like, listen to the horns on "Got to Get You Into My Life." Just the way those horns are placed as accents, and they have their own lines. It's just absolutely, that's as ahead of its time as running tapes at different speeds and loops.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not like, classical type, like French horn, like,
No.
I mean, which you would use on.
It's like big band. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like, no, it's jazzy.
It's that brassy. Yeah. It's that brass.
Yeah. It's incredible. Yeah. One of my all-time favorite songs by him, hands down.
Yeah. Me too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
When I heard it, I'm like, oh, I haven't heard it in so long. So it's that much more.
And yes, it is an outlier of a song for this album. I mean, it's just nothing else sounds like it on the record. It's like, and then right after that, you got Tomorrow Never Knows. I mean, come on.
That tells you that that's the McCartney, that's the Lennon and McCartney. Like,
yeah,
in a nutshell, in a 2-track sequence, that's Lennon and McCartney.
Yeah.
The same way Paperback Writer and Rain is. Right, Paperback Writer is an upbeat song about becoming a novelist and making something yourself, and then Rain is like, when the rain comes, it's like they run and hide their heads. It's like, okay,
but it's a great song though.
They are. They're all great, but that's why they work so well. Is McCartney by himself would probably be too saccharine and too poppy at this point, and Lennon by himself would be too much of a downer. So that's why these things work, is because they're nice counterpoints. So you get something strange and weird, like She Said, and then the opener on the other side of the album is Good Day Sunshine. Which is sunny and happy, and it's got this barrel house piano, like Eric said, and that's what makes this album. It's less of a leap, Mike, for someone who's, a lot of people will point to Sgt. Pepper. Like, oh, you got to listen to that album. I think Revolver might be, if you're looking for those aspects but don't want to go into the you think Revolver is kind of the sweet spot?
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty excellent. And as you said, with like the kind of 1-2 punch of the Lennon McCartney, not to plug another podcast, but there's Paul McCartney's A Life in Lyrics. Have you guys heard that? Mm-hmm. He talks about how, like, Lennon would make fun of him for like making songs about love, songs about love. And he's like, what better things to write about too? And that's why I found it fascinating with how there's one of the sweetest love songs on here, There, and Everywhere. And then there's For No One, like the biggest heartbreaker.
Yeah.
And I just found like that to be just fascinating, that it's the same album. And those two, just such a wide variety of those two.
Yeah. He was just able to tap in on this stuff. Really, really just.
You really don't get the sense that they really were saying anything. It's not a complete thought in the sense that the songs aren't sort of cohesive in that way. Mm-hmm. It's like they're just kind of writing about anything at this point, and the experimentation of it was the thing. I mean, of course, that would change a little bit, right? I mean, Sgt. Pepper, you kind of got this sort of like loose concept going on. You got this. It's almost like a proggy, very, the sort of start of prog rock right there. I mean, I dare say it starts with this record too, but they're not really, I like that. I like that the fact that every song is different, that every, it's got all these different textures and it's a breeze of an album to get through, really. If you think about it, it's like it goes by like that, and you just want to listen to it again.
14 songs. I mean, you're getting a lot. You're getting a lot of material. For bang for your buck. So, I think this is a good time to pause, and we're gonna subject Mike and Eric to 3 truths and a lie. Here comes the theme song.
3 truths and a lie. Guess which one's the disguise? He said he would never deny, but his sweet words were sly.
My sweet words are sly, because I'm going to be telling 3 truths and a lie. Mike, you're getting the full ride today. You're getting thrown into a Beatles episode and 3 truths and a lie. Well, I wasn't going to let this opportunity pass.
I'm kind of nervous about this one, because counting last episode, I'm like 1-0, because I got you had like a question on that last time, and I'm like, We'll see how this
There
one
we go.
goes.
Well, this time it's not 3 lies and a truth, but 3 truths and a lie, because the truth about this album is so much stranger than me making stuff up. So we're going to read 4 statements. 3 of them are absolutely true. One of them is a lie. And you at home, if you're playing, hit us up on Instagram, YouTube, or Facebook. Let us know how you did on 3 truths and a lie. Did I catch you, or did you see through the subterfuge and see through the smoke and mirrors and see the truth? So I'm going to read 4 statements. And we'll have Eric go first this time. We'll let Mike sweat it out a little bit, Eric, I think. And I want you to really take your time. Eric, don't be in a rush to decide. Let it, just put this guy on the boiler for a little bit. So here we go. I'm going to read the 4 statements. You let me know which one you think is the lie. Which one did I make up? Okay. So statement number 1. Although Revolver was released while the Beatles were touring, no songs from the album were performed live. Statement number 1. Statement number 2. In addition to Brian Jones, Marianne Faithfull, and Donovan, Grace Slick sang backing vocals on Yellow Submarine. Statement number 3. The album was almost titled Abracadabra. Number 4. The song Got to Get You Into My Life is about pot. Let me read those 4 statements again. First statement, although Revolver was released while the Beatles were touring, no songs from the album were performed live. Statement number 2, in addition to Brian Jones, Marianne Faithfull, and Donovan, Grace Slick also sang backing vocals on Yellow Submarine, in addition to those 3 other people. Statement number 3, the album was almost titled Abracadabra. Statement number 4, Got to Get You Into My Life is not about love, but it is about Paul's love of pot. 3 of those statements are true. One of them is a flat out lie. Mike, you can't get ready to fire off. You're going to wait.
Yep.
To let that seat get nice and hot for you. Eric.
Number 2.
Number 2 you think is a lie.
Is a lie, yeah.
In addition to Brian Jones, Marianne Faithfull, and Donovan, Grace Slick sang backing vocals on Yellow Submarine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Never heard that. The other ones sound familiar. I think I'm fairly certain that, yeah.
Okay. He's going with that one. Mike Stefano.
All right. So I know number 4 is true. Because I
know. Because I converted you from saying it.
I have a story about that later, but I know
that down pretty quick.
Yep. I know number 4 is true. I was torn between number 2 and number 3.
Okay. The album was almost titled Abracadabra, and in addition to Brian Jones, Marianne Faithfull, and Donovan, Grace Slick sang backing vocals on Yellow Submarine.
Yeah. So to differentiate myself, I'll go with the Abracadabra one.
The album was almost titled Abracadabra.
Yeah, I'll pick that one.
Okay. All right. Well, the first truth, quite true, is although Revolver was released while the Beatles were touring, no songs from the album were performed live. It was just too difficult. That was the whole point. Yeah. Is like we can't do it. We can't perform these songs. It's just not, and we don't want to. The second truth, of course, Mike was right. Got to Get You Into My Life is about pot. McCartney was already putting his cards on the table. He just he said some people write songs about the love of chocolate or the love of other things. And I'm writing about my love of pot. And he would spend some time in a jail in Japan, Eric, remember in 1980 for
that's right. Yep.
His love of pot. And then they threw him out of the country forever. But anyway. All right, so we got 2 statements left. One, in addition to Brian Jones, Marianne Faithfull, and Donovan, Grace Slick sang backing vocals on Yellow Submarine, and the album was almost titled Abracadabra. One of those is true. One of those I made up. Which would you like?
Well, give us the lie.
Give us the lie. Yeah. You want to know what I fibbed on, huh?
Yeah.
The lie of the matter is, in addition to Brian Jones, Marianne Faithfull, and Donovan, Grace Slick sang backing vocals on Yellow Submarine. Grace Slick did not. Everybody else in that list did, but Grace Slick was not a member. So Eric did see through the subterfuge. The album was almost titled Abracadabra, but there was a group that put out an album called Abracadabra right before that. So they're like, okay, we're not gonna go there. Some other titles that they tossed around was 4 Sides to the Circle, Magic Circle. Ringo Starr, of course, joked because the Rolling Stones had put out Aftermath,
Yeah.
that the album be called After Geography instead of After Math, After Geography. Other suggestions were Bubble and Squeak, Beatles on Safari, and Freewheelin' Beatles and Pendulum. So we think of these classic titles, and Revolver was not in the first running, even close to the first running.
What was the Bubbles one?
Bubble and Squeak.
Just think of like history, looking back, like Bubble and Squeak. What a
Rubber
classic!
Soul and Bubble and Squeak.
Fascinating.
I mean, you have Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, so I don't know how much
Sure.
I mean, right? That's kind of a very strange title.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's like So yeah, but I don't know about Bubble and Beatles on Safari. Nah, Freewheelin' Beatles. I think that's a takeoff on Bob Dylan. Freewheelin'.
Yeah, for sure.
Four Sides to the Circle, a little too obvious. Magic Circle doesn't, maybe because we're so used to it. Abracadabra would have been interesting, but it wouldn't. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's an interesting. It's an interesting choice.
Yeah,
for it. But Revolver just seems to do it. So anyway,
yeah.
All right. Well, we're at the point where we talked a lot about these songs, but Mike, why don't you give me three songs that really, if you're going to tell, if someone's going to listen to Revolver and they're like, what should I watch out for? What three are you going to give them?
Absolutely, Got to Get You Into My Life for all the reasons that we said before. But it is such a yes.
All right, you said all the reasons.
All of the reasons.
Okay.
Which my wife found out on our wedding night that like it was about pot, and she was horrified.
So how could you pick this?
Sounds like a great love song, and he played it for the Obama, so that was pretty sweet too.
I was alone. I took a ride. I didn't know what I would find there, so I'm guessing he came upon a patch of
Got to Get You Into My Life.
Anyway,
man.
okay.
But absolutely, just the big band, like it's it's fun to listen to. And so that absolutely, I love Eleanor Rigby. Like I know everyone loves that song. It's a downer. I've always kind of envisioned it as like the other side of Penny Lane, Lane, and then Eleanor Rigby, like just two sides of the same coin. And it's something that I has been growing on me, and it's stuck in my head all of the time. But I'm Only Sleeping is just it's always in my head, and it's just so smooth. And all like the weird, the guitar, everything about it. And then Cheating, I'm going to have to say Here, There, and Everywhere. So 4. I'm picking those 4.
All right.
Absolutely.
Heavy on the McCartney.
Yeah.
Heavy on the James Paul. All right. Eric, what do you got?
Well, I'm just going to cheat a little. Well, not cheat, but
that's okay.
Pick one. I'm going to pick 3.
Okay.
I'm not a big. I'm not. For the record, I'm not a fan of Yellow Submarine. That's just not.
It hasn't aged well for me.
Same.
Yeah, it's
no.
not.
So Ringo's out, but he makes up for it on his drumming on Tomorrow Never Knows. So that's going to be my Lennon pick. My McCartney pick is going to be Eleanor Rigby for sure, and then of course Lennon. Harrison. I'm going to go with I Want to Tell You. Yeah, okay. There's just something about that track that it gets me every time. It just I love the build up. It sneaks up on you. It's just an odd song, but I love it. So there.
All right. Yeah, I'm not going to surprise anybody with Got to Get You Into My Life. I Want to Tell You and Your Bird Can Sing. But if you said, you already talked about And Your Bird Can Sing, I would probably put Dr. Robert in there. Because that's an interesting 3. Those songs are 3 in a row. Dr. Robert, I Want to Tell You, and Got to Get You Into My Life. That's an interesting trio from the 3 songwriters in a row. Eric would probably go the other way of I Want to Tell You, Got to Get You Into My Life, and Tomorrow Never Knows as a 3, probably as a 3. If you had to pick a 3 sequence thing, any of those you're gonna win on. It's just this is if you're just getting into the Beatles. That's the beauty of the Beatles too, is everything is so different that you hear something and you think it's the greatest, and then you hear something else and you go, oh shit, that's the greatest. Then you hear something else like, oh my god, for a while I thought the White Album was like the greatest thing ever, and then you listen to Abbey Road or you listen to something else and you go, holy, even though the stuff is, their later stuff doesn't always mean for me it's the best. Sometimes that early raw stuff I really appreciate that and I really like it too. It's refreshing as well. So I think that's the beauty of the Beatles is there's something for everybody, Eric. I think it's got that, like I said, they did it in 8 years.
Yeah.
Literally. Technically 7 years.
Just for the,
for the record,
the musicality of it, the recording, this is why it's my favorite, but it is hard to pick a favorite Beatles album, isn't it? I mean, it's just, you're right. I mean, you sometimes you're in the mood to listen to Abbey Road, the warmness of that record. And that sounds great. And, White Album, might be the most difficult to get through, especially in one sitting, because it's just kind of like, and
a lot there,
but there's some good stuff on that record. And but I can consistently, this is the one that I always go to. I love the sound of it. I just, it's quick and it's an easy listen for me. And it's, and because it's so brilliant at the same time, that's what I love. Sometimes, I do like long stuff, but it's just, I'll just breeze right through this. And it was just,
it's good stuff. Before I get to Mike for final closing things, I saw a little snippet of an interview with John Lennon. And the guy asked John Lennon, why did the Beatles break up? And John Lennon was like, honestly, I got tired of playing with the same people. Mm-hmm. He goes, everybody thinks that we were together from 62 to 69. He goes, but I was with these guys since I was 15. I said, we've been playing since we were kids together. And he goes, and I just, want to, play with different people and different things. And when he said that, it kind of made sense. I'm like, again, the notions of solo albums weren't really a thing yet as an outlet where you go do a solo album and come back. It was usually the, band breaks up and everyone goes their separate ways. He was like, yeah, I've known, Paul since I was 15.
Yeah.
And they're the only guys I've ever played with. So everyone thinks it was just the 60s, but it goes back even further. And he goes, I just, wanted to play with different people and do different things. So
yeah,
interesting. Anyway.
I didn't think of that.
We'll give Mike the final thoughts on Revolver. Go ahead, take it away.
Yeah, I'll definitely say top 3 of my favorite albums. I do love Abbey Road for like the warmness and everything about it. That's probably my all-time favorite, but this is definitely up there. There's no misses. I don't know. Just every song is great for their own reasons. And I listened to it like on my run, which I did right before this, and that they all really stick out, and it's just an enjoyable listen. It's great.
Yeah. I don't think this is a hot take, but there's not really a Beatles album that's got filler on it. I mean, it's hard, right? It's really, you can put on any from Please Please Me to Hard Day's Night to Help to to Abbey Road, and
Hard Day's Night is probably my favorite of the early period.
Early, yeah.
Oh, we will get to it, Eric. At this point, we're going the whole way. Maybe we won't do Yellow Submarine soundtrack, although when we get, it'll be the last. I can tell you, Yellow Submarine soundtrack will be the last one we do if we get to it. If we drained it.
Yeah.
What do you got, Mike? You got something there?
Yeah, I do have a quick prop. So I mentioned my wedding before, but I have my vows, and one of my pages was I want to sneak in some puns, but I guess I said I promise to be there when you need help with something, even if it is across the universe or here, there, and everywhere. A day in the life with the two of us. I was sure to fall in love, and then parentheses, with you. So
wow,
that was like a good one where I'm like, I snuck that in there, and the people that got it, and the people that didn't get it aren't fans of the Beatles. And
did you
they're not your friends anymore?
Did you put those inflections though on the words or no?
I kept it subtle. Okay, and
cool.
I looked around in the crowd and tried to make some eye contact and see what I got there. But
look for recognition.
Yep,
great.
So it was on one hand to like show my love for the band, and on the other hand, like quick poke at my wife and my father-in-law. So
wow, that's great though. That's how, that shows you were really deep into the Beatles. And how long ago did you get married?
So 2022.
Okay, so that's recent, relatively recent. So this is
nice.
Good. Yeah. Congratulations for on your wedding and for putting the Beatles into those vows, huh? You know what?
I have to ask, Mike. I have to ask why does your wife think they're overrated? Did she give a reason, or she just...
I don't know. I think she just likes to push my buttons. It's fascinating. We're trying to. So her favorite artist of all time is Taylor Swift. She's been like a massive Swiftie for like ever. She saw her back when she was like just long time ago. So we're trying to like listen to each other's albums and like appreciate more of it. But she's just like, oh, they're like so overrated. I'm like, how can you think that when they have like even someone that can say like, oh, I don't listen to the Beatles, they can name 10 songs.
Yeah.
Like everyone knows so many Beatles and they were only around for such a short time.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't
are
know
you,
what it
are
is.
you letting her pick the album, or is she, or are you saying, listen to this? Because that could, if she's a Swiftie, maybe you want to go with with Hard Day's Night or something earlier to kind of get her in. If you give her the White Album,
right.
Yeah, she's going to be like, fuck this.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think most of what she's been listening to has been like
or the greatest hits.
Abbey Road, or the greatest hits. But yeah, I think she just like pokes fun at like she makes fun of like Octopus's Garden and Yellow Submarine and
yeah. I mean, they definitely wrote some goofy.
Yeah, and then they have like And the Bird Can Sing. Like they have so much. Yeah. So now I think she just doesn't want to back down. It's just one of these petty arguments that we have.
Of course, she's going to die on that hill now.
Yeah. Yep.
She will die on that hill. So. All right, I think that's going to do it for this episode. Mike, you made it through.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
It wasn't a top 5. We weren't throwing softballs your way, and I'm glad. I'm glad. When we were communicating, you mentioned the Beatles, and I'm like, oh, let's get a new take on the Beatles from someone who's kind of recently into it. I love that. That's what I always say. What I love about this show is hearing, we know, Eric and I know how we feel. We know the backwards and forwards, which is great, but it's also great getting someone else in there because then they give us a new coloration, some new depth on it and what they're feeling, and hopefully we do the same. So So Mike Stefano, OCR Report on Instagram, Obstacle Running Adventures Podcast. We're going to link those in the show notes. So go check him out. Just give him a listen. Again, he's a great interviewer, and your wife is also on your podcast, right? She's your co-host.
Correct. Yeah. So feel free to write in and tell her that she's wrong.
We're going to start a campaign on your podcast about the Beatles.
Absolutely.
So absolutely go check out Mike's podcast. And again, I'm sure we will have you back again. As sure as the sun will rise and set. It's great having you here. And you almost made it through 3 Lies and a Truth, but that's where I live. That's, but now you want to come back for another try. Eric he sees through a lot of this bullshit now. He's like, yeah, I know.
We got to get you on a movie episode.
Yes. Yeah.
If you're into
absolutely.
Film, so
that'd be fun. Some of that working up. So
I'm on a journey going through a lot of like great hits that I've missed. Like I've only just recently saw The Godfather.
Absolutely. That makes 2 of us. That makes 2 of us.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
We were giving Dean.
That was the whole intro of a previous episode that I'd never seen. I'm supposedly a movie guy.
Yeah, and being Italian too, like was an extra insult to my family. So
you're gonna take away the Italian street cred if you don't watch it by a certain age.
It was coming. So yeah.
So Mike, thank you so much. That's going to do it for this episode. For Mike, for Eric, this has been Dean, and we will catch you on the flip side.
You've been listening to the 3324 podcast with Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 podcast and on Twitter at 3324p to join the conversation.